Tampa Bay is like no place else.
Wait, you can't recycle the bag. You have to throw it away.
Proper recycling keeps it that way for everyone. Bags tangle in machinery and can bring sorting efforts to a halt.
No bags.
Trash the bags and keep our recycling program moving forward.
No, Mom, look. No plastic bags.
Do your part to keep our recycling bag-free. Trash the tanglers or return them to participating retailers. For more information, visit tampabayrecycles.org.
morning, everybody. Thank you. Please silence all electronic devices for the duration of the meeting. Welcome to the April 21st, 2025 Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'm Councilmember Gil Schussler, Chair of the Finance and Audit Committee. The meeting format is hybrid. We'll do a roll call, please, if we will. Catherine?
Committee Member Hartfield. Committee Member King.
Here.
Committee Member Knight. Committee Chair Schussler.
Here.
Committee Member Williams.
Here.
You do have a quorum.
Okay, a quorum is physically present at the County Center, 601 East Kennedy Boulevard, 26th floor conference room, and the rest of the board members are participating via communication media technology if they're on board. If you'll please look at your screen, at your devices, an image of the flag is displayed. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on the agenda is public comment. No one is scheduled to speak. Okay. Is there anyone present for public comment at this meeting? Appearing to be none. This concludes the public input section of the meeting. Next on the agenda in your packet is the minutes of the March 3rd, 2025 Finance and Audit Committee meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Staff will record the votes. Next on the agenda is a committee action items for review by the committee for the recommendation on approval by the full board of directors. Action item 4A is recommend to the full board directors authorize the CEO to exercise option years of the existing contract for Coach Crafters, Inc. for body shop services. Mr. Drainville, you're recognized to provide an overview of this item.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee members. Many of you know that HART does have a full operating body shop, but it's something I championed a few years ago. So HART is currently under contract with Coach Crafters for body shop services. The contract has a provision for 2 one-year options. This action item is requesting an authorization to exercise these option years. So funding for the body shop services that are not covered under the insurance is allocated in the FY25 operating budget. And I'll take any questions.
Do committee members have any questions or comments for staff? Ms. Williams, you're recognized.
Mr. Drainville, I'm sure it's probably already covered in the budget, right?
Yeah, it's
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Appearing to be none. Is there a recommendation by the full, is there a recommendation to recommend to the HART Board of Directors approval of action item 4A and advance it to the full HART board members on the May 5th, 2025 Board of Directors regular meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Yes, second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Committee action items with presentations. Staff will now present committee action items that are supplemented with presentations. First one is 5A, to recommend to the HART Board of Directors authorize staff to seek public input for setting the 3-year goal of the Hillsborough Transit Authority's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise DBE program and submit the 3-year goal to the Federal Transit Administration by August 1st, 2025. Mr. Greenfield, you're recognized to present this item and provide an overview of the item.
Thank you, Chair. So at this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Kirk, HART's Chief Financial Officer, up to the podium to walk us through the FTA requirements for development and submission of the Triennial DBE Gold. One of the objectives of the DBE program is to promote the use of DBEs in HART federally assisted contracts and procurement activities conducted by the recipients.
Ms. Kirk, you're recognized. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair Schussler, members of the Finance and Audit Committee, Mr. Drainville, good morning.
Good morning.
The goal of this presentation is to provide the Finance and Audit Committee an overview of HART's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program and discuss the proposed overall DBE goal for fiscal years 26 to 28. In addition to serving HART as the CFO, I also serve as HART's DBE Liaison Officer, and in that capacity of the DBE Liaison Officer under the leadership of Mr. Drainfield, I'm responsible for implementing all aspects of the DB program and ensuring that HART complies with all provisions of federal regulations governing the DB program. To date, we have not received an executive order or other federal guidance to eliminate or change the DB program. Therefore, we are moving forward with the DB program, including DB goal setting consistent with current federal regulations. If guidance is provided to HART by FTA that changes the DB program, we will inform this committee and the board and modify our program as directed. This is the agenda for today's presentation. I'll share the federal requirements of the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. I'll discuss the definition of a disadvantaged business enterprise, the definition of a small business enterprise. I'll talk about the expenditures to DBE and SBE firms. I'll talk about our outreach events, and then I'll cover the goal for fiscal year 26 and 28, and also share the goal for our current goal, which is for 23 to 25, and then talk about how we set goals on contracts to meet the overall DBE goal, and talk about next steps. The DBE program is governed by the Code of Federal Regulations, specifically 49 CFR Part 26. And the purpose and the policy of the HART DB program is to ensure the DBEs, as defined in the Code of Federal Regulations, have an equal opportunity to receive and participate in DOT-assisted contracts, and of course, those contracts that we have are primarily with FTA. FTA, as our funding agency, requires HART to develop a DB program and submit that program to the FTA. The program has to be updated when significant changes occur, and our last DB program is dated April of 2024. As I stated, we have to set an overall goal and discuss our methodology, and we do that every 3 years. And then twice a year, on June 1st and December 1st, we have to report to the FTA. This is the definition of a DBE. And to be considered a DBE, or a disadvantaged business enterprise, the DBE must be a for-profit small business. And that means it has to be at least 51% owned by one or more individuals who are both socially and economically disadvantaged. And it has to be owned and operated by the DBE. And I'll just note that the size limit in terms of dollars is $30.72 million. This is a list of those individuals that are considered socially and economically disadvantaged. I don't have to read the list, but you can just read at your leisure. And of course, to be a DBE, you have to be certified. Every state has a unified certification program. The Florida Unified Certification Program has 9 certified members, and we've highlighted the Hillsborough County Aviation Authority, which is the Tampa airport, and that's the certified agency in our area. The agencies that certify the DBEs have to follow these certification considerations, and the firm, first and foremost, has the burden of proof to demonstrate that they qualify for DBE. Then there's some general certification rules, and For instance, they have to be for-profit, and they actually have to be engaged in a business. And then it has to be a small business as defined by the SBA, or the Small Business Administration. They have to be socially and economically disadvantaged as defined by the Small Business Administration. The personal net worth of the owner must be at or below $2,047,000. The firm must be owned at least 51% by the disadvantaged person. And of course, you can finance the investment in the firm. I had already mentioned it has to be controlled in terms of decision-making, and then you can only be certified for the net codes that you perform work. In terms of the Small Business Enterprise Program, which is different than the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, in addition to that DB program, federal regulations require HART to implement a program to foster small business participation. HART established the Small Business Enterprise, or SBE, program in 2010 pursuant to a resolution that was approved by this board. And then local funding, not federal funding, is used for the small business procurements. This is the definition of a small business enterprise. Again, it has to be organized for profit. It has to have a place of business in the United States. It has to be independently owned and operated, and it meets the size requirements as specified by the Small Business Administration. For the SBE program, we do not establish goals. FDA does not require us to establish goals. It has to be race neutral, and that is a program that, while benefiting DBEs, is not solely focused on DBE programs. And then all DBEs are presumed eligible to participate, and there are set-asides allowed for the SBE program, but no set-asides are allowed for a DBE program. These are the agencies in our area that are qualified to certify small business enterprises. And I'll just note that HART is not a certifying agency for DBE nor SBE. So we rely on the other agencies to certify for us. In terms of DB program and SBE program, this is expenditures to DBEs and SBEs since 2022. In terms of public outreach, we are a public partner in the Hillsborough County area and surrounding areas. And so we have 2 DBE coordinators that are assigned to work on our program and go into the public to talk about our program, communicate contracting opportunities, and just make sure that the community connects with HART. And this is just a list of some of the outreach efforts since the beginning of this fiscal year. And these are just a few pictures of the DB coordinators out in the community. This is a list of future outreach efforts. I just want to draw your attention to August 15th. Is really August 15, 2025. That's Pathways to Business. That's the HART signature event for public outreach. So while we go into the public and participate with events held by the county, the city, and other agencies, we also conduct our signature event in August of every year, and we call it Pathways to Business. Okay, so speaking about the 3-year goal, as I mentioned, every 3 years, HART is required to submit a goal based on a federally prescribed goal-setting methodology. There are about 4 or 5 methodologies. We choose to use the DBE Directives and Census Bureau data methodology, and it's a 2-step process. We first determined the base figure for the relative availability of DBEs, and that's really calculating the number of ready, willing, and able DBEs in our market from our DBE directory. And then the second step is to adjust the base figure if necessary. And we normally adjust it just based on history and averages to make sure that we are in the ballpark in terms of our DBE goal. So for 2026 to 2028, our proposed goal is 16.6%. Our projection is race gender, 9.6%, and race neutral, 7%. And then you can see the comparable goals for 23 to 26. I know you can't see it very well, but this is just an example of the form that we use to calculate the DBE participation on federally funded contracts, because in order for us to meet our overall goal, we have to set goals on contracts. And that's basically setting a goal where there is contracting opportunities. We'll talk with the project managers, determine what skills can be performed from by DBEs, understanding the number of DBEs that are in the database that can perform on the contracts, and we'll calculate a goal for that particular contract. And, you know, contracts come to this board, you know, all contracts don't have a goal, but we set goals where a contract is reasonable. And in this particular contract, we set a goal of 19.4% for DBE participation. So our next steps for establishing the DBE goal: we are required by federal regulations to conduct public outreach. We will have a public meeting, and we'll also publish our goal in the local newspapers and conduct other outreach efforts. We have to do this according to federal regulations, and once we complete our public outreach efforts, then we'll submit our goal to the FTA by August 1st of 2025. So based on this discussion, we will recommend that the HART Board of Directors authorize staff to seek public input for setting the 3-year goal for Hillsborough Transit Authority's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, and submit the 3-year goal to the Federal Transit Administration by August 1st, 2025. That completes the presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kirk. Catherine, please record the arrivals of the board members. Thank you. Okay, any questions of Ms. Kirk and the presentation of the DBE program? Appearing to be none, is there a motion to recommend to the HART Board to approve item 5A and advance it to the full board of Directors at the May 5th meeting?
So moved.
Do we have a
Gary
second?
Hartfield.
First and second, any comments on the motion? Appearing to be none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Likewise, nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Okay, next we have item 5B, to recommend to the HART Board of Directors to authorize the CEO to modify the existing contract with West Coast Transportation Services, Inc., to add $4,935,995 for HART Plus Customer Choice Program, and increase the not-to-exceed amount from $4,772,640 to $9,708,635. Mr. Drainville, you're recognized to provide an overview of this item.
Thank you, Chair. So this committee action item requests an increase in the contract of HART Plus Customer Choice Program. The HART Customer Choice Program provides an alternative transportation options to pre-qualified users of its HART Plus service. This increase is a result of an unprecedented demand for HART Customer Choice service. This request will allow staff time to reassess the program, possibly resolicit or cancel this program, depending. The FY25 projected increase in expenses of $973,236 will be covered by the FY25 operating budget. After discussing with Ms. Kirk, a request for a budget amendment may be necessary for additional costs. The remaining $3,962,759 funding for future years is contingent upon FDOT grants and annual appropriations for this expenditure. Mr. McCarthy, HART's Chief Operations Officer, will present an overview of the Customer Choice Program, a cost analysis, and the contract amendment.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chairman Schisler, members of the committee, and Mr. Chief Executive. So I wanted to come here this morning to give you some background on what has been tremendous growth in HART's Customer Choice Program. So as you know, or may not know, the paratransit program is made up of two components: a traditional HART Plus program, which is our traditional vans that are made specifically for members of the disabled community, and we also have a complementary service called Customer Choice. And for both programs, you need to be qualified through our evaluation program to be considered qualified. Really, the main difference between the two programs is the Customer Choice Program is a lot more of a spontaneous, on-demand program, more akin to an Uber or a Lyft than our traditional paratransit service. Customers can schedule trips in advance, or they can schedule them via the app same day. The popularity of this program over the last 24 to 36 months has really been unprecedented. You don't really need to get into the minutia of this slide, but I just want to draw your attention to the chart that's on the left-hand side. We are currently in the midst of a 5-year contract, three-year base with 2 option years with West Coast Transportation to provide this service. The total all-in budget for that is $4,772,640. We're on the precipice right now of having expanded that entire 5-year allotment just 2 years into the contract. And you'll see it better on the next slide. But essentially, we thought we were going to provide anywhere from 2,000 to 2,400 trips a month. The last 3 or 4 months have seen over 12,000 trips a month. So it's just really unprecedented growth and nothing that the contract ever anticipated. It's worth saying that when this contract was procured back in '23, it was based on numbers coming out of COVID. So the ridership was relatively low. It was in that 2,000 to 2,200 level. So that's what the 5-year contract was based upon. And as you'll see in years 1, 2, and 3, there's no escalation. There was no growth considered. So that's again part of the overall problem. If you look at this chart here, I really think it's telling. It'll show you the growth of the program really since March of '23. Again, we were averaging in the low 2,000s. Last few months, we've seen well over 10,000 averaging per month. And if you can see, the contract allotment is about 87,000, or was proposed to be about 87,000 when the contract was executed. Our last invoice, we paid $312,000. So as I said, it's just, it's really extraordinary growth. We've talked to the vendor, but nobody can really determine where this market has come from. We've done a ridership breakdown. We have some people using this service over 40 times a month, over 30 times a month. So it's really come an extreme amount in a very short period of time. And unfortunately, the current contract is just not robust enough or sustainable to continue the service without the action this morning or at the full board. This kind of gives you a breakdown, again, some history of the spend. The numbers that you see there in red are projections. They have about an 18% escalation. But essentially, in order for us to get through the remainder of FY25 and FY26, which would be the conclusion of the 3-year base, we will not be exercising the 2 option years. We will need $4,935,995. So in thinking about the program kind of holistically, one of the things that we thought about right away was to modify the hours of service of the Customer Choice Program. Interestingly enough, when the program was procured, we thought that it was going to be Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. For reasons unbeknownst to anyone currently at HART, the hours of Customer Choice mirrored the traditional HART Plus operation. So it's very early in the morning to very late in the evening. So we're looking at the potential of curtailing the hours to a traditional Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. That's more in line with what, say, Sunshine Line does. So we're looking at that. We also have our own internal challenges relative to the amount of vehicles that we have every day and the overall workforce. We haven't really evolved and grown in those two areas due to, fiscal restrictions and things of that nature. So we've been using Yellow Cab kind of as an overflow for what we can't accommodate on HART Plus. And kind of the difference, the distinction, if you will, is HART Plus, by law, we cannot refuse a ride. So we have to accommodate those customers, and in order to do that, we've been sending a surplus over to Yellow Cab. So we're taking some steps internally to try to rectify that. But if we were theoretically to accomplish both of these things, we look to obtain a savings of about $125,000 a month, which would make a serious dent in our overall budget problem relative to this issue. Just if you look at this graph real quickly, everything you see in the purple color represents hours or expenditures outside of the 8 to 5 time frame. So that would all be savings, again, about $83,000 a month. So certainly, worth looking at. So some of the things we're considering, as I said, certainly changing the hours, but potentially one of the things is maybe capping the number of trips that someone can take on Customer Choice in a given month. PSTA, for example, has a 30-trip cap. Anything after 30, the customer is responsible for. We have, again, internal challenges that we need to meet in terms of rolling stock. And you're going to hear a presentation later this morning about some vehicle innovations that we have. But one of the big things we're also looking at, so some of you may remember, some of you may not, in 2022, we expanded the traditional ADA boundary for paratransit from 3/4 of a mile, which is what the FTA stipulates, to 1.5 miles. So we really need to look, long and hard at that and come to the realization that perhaps that isn't something that HART is able to do, because it also applies, in this case, to the Customer Choice Program. So it's broadening even more the amount of potential customers. And perhaps the biggest thing is that, we will develop a new RFP within the next 18 months, hopefully sooner, prior to the end of this contract, but we will not exceed, that third year. And within the restructuring of this RFP, we will consider, a lot of the things that we've talked about relative to the structure of the program so that everybody understands it, and realizes that it does have certain limitations, because just from a fiscal standpoint, HART's fiscal health notwithstanding, this is just an unsustainable model in the current environment, and it's incumbent upon us to react. So there's two increases, one for the remainder of this year. That'll be covered in the FY25 operating budget. The remaining funds for FY26 will be contingent upon FDOT grants and another appropriation. A budget amendment for this year may be necessary, as the CEO alluded to. So the committee action item is to recommend that the HART Board of Directors authorize the Chief Executive Officer to modify the existing contract with West Coast Transportation Services, Incorporated, to add $4,935,000 $995 for HART Plus Customer Choice Program and increase the total not-to-exceed amount from $4,772,640 to $9,708,635. I'd be happy to entertain any questions from the committee.
Any questions for Ms. McCarthy? Ms. Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you so much for the presentation and the detail that you provided in regards to trips and what was initially benchmarked. Question for you. It sounds like we're saying that $83,000 is the savings, and all of the customers that are in the purple will no longer have services, or they will pay for services. Can you explain that to me a little bit more, please?
Right, so we do expect a certain amount of that ridership, not all of it, to go back to traditional HART Plus, right? So they'd have to make a reservation in advance, they'd have to ride on the van with, theoretically other customers, their trip times would be longer. But those that do not have any choice, that would be probably their number one alternative. But to be frank, this has really become a taxi service in a lot of ways. And, I don't have anything to necessarily verify this, but I'm of the opinion that a lot of these folks will go to traditional Uber and Lyft and other taxi services in those hours, outside of traditional, so say, for example, medical appointments, things of that nature, that would still fall within that 8 to 5 time frame, so they still would be accommodated. But for very early in the morning and later in the evening, yes, they would have to find an alternative.
Thank you.
Mr. Hartfield, I believe you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let me ask Sean, and thank you for the presentation. How's this program funded now? Do we receive revenue from the federal state government to fund choice?
Yeah, so it's funded through an FDOT grant, 5310 FDOT grant. But, traditionally, so for example, the year that we're currently in, the grant is for $1.5 million. 750 from them and 750 local match. If we were to get up into 3 and 4 and 5 million, I just don't think that that's necessarily a realistic ask, that they're going to continue to come back year after year as this thing grows, exponentially with those kind of revenues. I defer to the CFO for her opinion, but I just don't think it's, it's something that we can count on.
Any thoughts, Ms. Carter? For me, working with the physically and intellectually disabled is a passion project. I've been an owner-operator in this industry for 20-plus years. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to make sense of it all.
I would request if, Ms. McCarthy, do you have the stats, like the actual ambulatory rides and who's actually riding the service?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're seeing, even on our own HART Plus, but specifically on customer choice, their rate of ambulatory passengers is in the high 80s. So there aren't a lot of, not to say that there aren't, a myriad of different disabilities out there, but, I think when we think of paratransit, we think of the traditional big hulking van that has, the ability to lift wheeled mobility devices, and, that's kind of the tradition. But what we're seeing at Yellow Cab or West Coast Customer Choice is that the majority of the ridership is ambulatory.
Okay. So is it reasonable to assume that, and Sean, I know you alluded to it, is it reasonable to assume that we could have this funded or no?
I mean, we could always request and have discussions with FDOT, but we'd have to look at what our revenues are coming in at and make sure it is sustainable, and we don't want to be back in the same situation year after year after year.
Right. Okay. So I like the idea of the cap and maybe mirroring what they're doing in Pinellas. That makes sense. But a $5 million deficit, that's a huge ask. And we're 2 years into a 5-year contract, correct?
Right.
And we're bleeding,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's, you know, the way that the contract that we're currently in was scoped was just based on data that wasn't really, you know, because if you even go back prior to COVID, the numbers aren't anywhere near what they are today, but they're still much higher than what they were during that period. So, you know, hindsight's always 20/20, but it was just, it's based on a very limited amount of ridership. And like I said, this has just been an explosion.
Sean, is there an entrepreneurial opportunity? Is there a self-sufficiency or revenue-generating opportunity for HART that could be developed out of this? There's a demonstrated need.
Right.
Is there an opportunity there?
Yeah, I don't think, you know, we've ever looked at it through a for-profit lens, to be frank. You know, things that have, you know, an ADA connotation, or things related to, you know, serving this demographic. Typically, profit, you know, isn't a major part of the conversation, but we're open to anything. Like I said, this new RFP, you know, hopefully brings in exactly what you're talking about, some type of innovations, whereby, you know, because we're subsidizing this thing completely now.
Yeah.
So the discussion needs to be had.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. King, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Sean. I don't want to sound hard-hearted about this, but why are we in the business of providing discounted taxi service to a certain segment of
Turn your mic on.
community?
The program has been in effect since 2015.
Okay?
As you know, I wasn't here in 2015, but my instincts tell me that initially it was just supposed to be a very small complementary service to serve a relatively small constituency. And for a very brief time, that was in fact the case. As I said, I don't think anybody, the many CEOs who've come and gone over the last decade, ever envisioned what it is today. In terms of the business model itself, I can't speak to that. I've asked the question privately and publicly over the last month, and, you know, it's hypothetical at best.
Am I correct in assuming that your projections suggest that it's going to be, continue to be increasingly financially expensive for
That's
HART
absolutely
to continue
correct.
to provide this?
Yes, sir. That is my opinion.
And at best, we're trying to stop the bleeding at the moment, or at least slow it down.
That's right.
Okay.
We're looking for a short-term lifeline to develop a long-term solution. And to be blunt, that long-term solution may be the elimination of this program.
Okay. The ridership that we're currently servicing through this program, they may be ambulatory, but are they economically disadvantaged?
That we don't have. I don't even know if the contractor maintains that data, to be frank, Director, but I haven't seen it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a few. We already talked about why the growth. We understand that. Are these single riders or are they multiple riders? Okay, so we've developed our own little Uber system.
That's
for
exactly right, Director.
Okay. Ms. Kirk, what would trigger a budget amendment? What's the threshold on that?
To Mr. Drainfield and to Director Schisler, a budget amendment is really when we know we're going to exceed the appropriation.
So it's our call.
It's our call. Normally, when we have slight increases in contracts, we can absorb it in the existing budget. But Mr. Drainville and I will meet probably in May or June and look at the expected expenditures. And if a budget amendment is necessary for this or other expenditures, then we'll bring it to the board probably in July.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. McCarthy, what would preclude us from modifying the terms of the program now?
Nothing.
Why aren't we just saying, okay, we're no longer single riders, we have to go to at least 2 or 3, and that would probably cut out quite a significant number
Right.
these trips. What would
We
preclude us
we
from
are
doing it?
prepared to do that. We wanted to make sure that the committee and the full board was aware of our intentions prior to doing that.
I'm wondering if we can make that recommendation to the board as opposed to just writing, opening the checkbook even wider. It'd be the proposal to say, let's review the restrictions, or let's review the qualifications for utilizing the single rider trips. Would that be,
I say that we could talk to Kathy and talk to the vendor on that, but it might be more advantageous to us to just relook at the scope in this short time, and then redevelop a new scope and put that out, instead of trying to modify it. But we can have those discussions with the vendor.
okay. What type of a motion would we need? Would that come from a board action, or us just referring it to that way, or what would be the most appropriate method?
I think the intentions is the amount we're asking for does cover the contract, but right now, what we're saying is we're most likely not gonna exercise the option, and we wanna get a new RFP on the street sooner than later.
Okay, so that we want to give you guys the guidance through the board to act accordingly, and give you time to make the adjustments. But in this particular case, by making this recommendation, we're not triggering any kind of a financial crisis for the board, but we are raising the red flag that we need to do something at this point going forward.
That's correct.
And exercising or not exercising the contract, or not exercising the option years, but rekindling the RFP. And that's what we're essentially doing with this motion.
Yes.
Okay. Board, everybody on the committee understand that and in agreement with that? Okay, if that's the case, then is there a motion to recommend to the full Board of Directors for the May 5th, 2005 meeting, the proposal as outlined by staff for the HART Choice Plus program?
I'm open to it, however, I have a friendly amendment
It is.
for staff to review and seek what entrepreneurial opportunity may exist from this demonstrated demand.
Okay, how will that impact the RFP process then?
We'll definitely have to have internal discussions on how we would go about that.
Okay. All right, do we have a second on the friendly amendment?
A second.
Okay. We have a motion with an amendment to have staff look at the potential entrepreneurial opportunities that come along with that. We have a motion, a second. Do we have any comments on the motion? If not, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. How will you bring that back to the board, or?
And I'm gonna need some clarification, because the specific, I mean, does the amendment include the increase of the expenditures?
I think the amendment does not preclude.
Okay, does not preclude?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so you work with it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments on the motion? Everybody on the same page? Okay, good deal. Did you raise your hand? Ms. McCarthy?
Pardon?
Did you raise your hand?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought you did. Okay, the next presentation supported two committee action items, 5C and 5D. Mr. Drainville, you're recognized to provide an overview of the item and introduce the presenter.
So this is another huge milestone for HART that must work in parallel with HART's CAD EVL implementation and upgrade to its antiquated analog radio communication system that integrates the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office 800 megahertz P25 simulcast system.
Should mic on.
Sorry. So the funding is allocated through the capital reserves transferred from ad valorem. Funding for future years of this annual maintenance is contingent on the annual appropriations for this expenditure. Funding of $3,692,871 for the equipment is allocated in the FY 2019 and FY 2023 Federal Highway Administration Surface Transportation Funds, and $621,121 will be funded by other federal sources and/or capital reserves transferred from ad valorem. Future year's funding for the warranty and support is contingent on the annual appropriation for this expenditure. The contract does not contain a DBE goal. Mr. McCarthy, Chief Operations Officer, will highlight how this upgrade will modernize HART's communication system.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Schisler, members of the committee, and Mr. CEO. I'm here this morning to talk about something that's vital to HART's future success and something that we've talked about in the past. That's to approve 2 contracts, one for our radio system and hardware and warranty with Communications International Incorporated. And the second contract is to approve a contract to join the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office tower and antenna infrastructure via an existing contract. The purpose of this endeavor is to enable system-wide radio interoperability, improved emergency response, and as the CEO said, most importantly, to support HART's current ongoing CAD-AVL upgrade. The system is quite frankly obsolete. It was originally installed in 2007. No longer is supported by the manufacturer. We have staff literally putting components of this together in the shop back at 21st. They're buying them on eBay, literally anywhere they can go to find these components because they're no longer available on the marketplace. Another reason we need this is limited coverage area. We only have 1 tower. Currently, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office has 18 towers. So they have range and coverage throughout all of the county. And the risk of a complete radio failure increases daily. The staff that we have currently working on radios, 2 gentlemen with over 30 years of service, who in the very near future will probably be moving on to the next chapter of their life. So we need to get into the 21st century in terms of technology and get something that's more mainline in the industry in terms of technology, and this contract allows us to do that. Just kind of some highlights of the system. This is a P25 digital radio system. P25 digital radio made its bones, if you will, during 9/11. It's considered the gold standard in the industry in terms of digital communication. It allowed firefighters and police and first responders during that emergency to remain connected throughout. What it also does is it puts us together with the other agencies in Hillsborough County, particularly during hurricane season. It allows us to be part of a more coordinated countywide management team. As I said, this improves signal range and tower redundancy, especially down in underserved areas like South County. As you know, we have a lot of difficulty, particularly on the paratransit operation down there. Our operators are constantly challenged with radio coverage and their ability to have their manifest or their schedule updated because we don't have the range. So this is going to be a huge improvement for the staff. As I said, improve EOC interoperability. And finally, it's going to improve things for basically the operators, the controllers, and anybody that's involved with managing transit operations at HART, not just from an emergency response, but even the day-to-day to complement CAD-AVL so that we have really good data on where our vehicles are related to schedule, headway, and things of that nature. So it's a long time coming and something we definitely need. Funding strategy for this project is twofold. The radio hardware is being paid for through federal grants. We're paying for this, if you recall, through the CAD-AVL grant. There was a delta of just under $4 million, so we're using that to pay for the hardware, the actual radios, and the hardware necessary. The second part of it, to get on the county system, we are not using federal dollars for that. It's funded by capital reserves. And the reason for that is that expenditure there's only one company that does that. And we met with the FTA and asked them if we could use federal dollars to simply, you know, give it to the company that manages it, and they told us that we could not. So knowing that they were the only ones that run the county system, we decided to pay for it that way. Just a little bit of a background on the RFP process. It was released in February of this year. 19 firms downloaded the RFP, but only one submitted. And I think that you'll see that that's kind of reflective of this dynamic relative to the county radio system. There really is only one vendor that is involved in the operation of it, and that's been traditionally the case for a number of years. Again, the radio infrastructure or the county system contract is already in place and meets procurement standards and avoids us having to do a separate procurement. So as I said, we're really an outlier as it relates to the system. All of the major entities within Hillsborough County already reside on the system. So it makes sense from a multitude of standpoint. You know, the incident command functionality alone really makes this a no-brainer. Again, this kind of further expands on the other entities within Hillsborough County who are part of this network. Pretty much anyone who's everybody except for us is part of the system. This slide here shows some of the other transit agencies that have this model in Florida. So Miami, PSTA, and Lynx all operate on a countywide P25 system. So this is, you know, certainly not, we're not the first to do this from a transit agency standpoint. As Mr. Drainville mentioned earlier, and I alluded to, this is a critical component in our CAT AVO program that was approved earlier by the board. New system, we need this to you know, CAT AVL is run on radio, so we need this to monitor our service. And we also have a need to kind of keep the CAT AVL program and the new radio project on a somewhat similar time path, so that when CAT AVL is ready to be installed on the vehicles and in the control center, that this backbone is already in place. So it's really important that we try to get these two timelines to mirror one another as closely as possible. So as I mentioned earlier, there's really one vendor that kind of is involved in the county system, and it's a company called Communications International. They are the vendor of record for the county system. They have a long-standing relationship in Hillsborough County, and HART will become the beneficiary of CI's vast network and ability to maintain and respond to problems relative to the network. And, you know, that's something that's going to be certainly a huge upgrade for us to have that kind of robust ability to keep the system up and running even during the worst of conditions. So just to recap why it matters, you know, first and foremost, safety makes it safer for the staff, improves safety during emergencies, brings interoperability, you know, eliminates a lot of our current vulnerabilities, as I outlined earlier, relative to just the day-to-day maintenance and upkeep of the system. And so now is the time that we really have to do this. So there's two committee action items for the committee. One, to recommend to the HART Board of Directors to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to award a contract to Communications International, Inc. for P25 radio communication system hardware in an amount of $3,692,871 and a 5-year warranty and support agreement in an amount of $506,011 for a total not to exceed amount of $4,198,882. And item 2, for the committee to recommend the HART Board of Directors authorize the Chief Executive Officer to piggyback on the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office contract with Communications International, Inc. to join the Hillsborough County radio system in an amount of $2,584,654 and a 5-year annual maintenance agreement in the amount of $429,190 for a total not to exceed amount of $3,013,844. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the
Do
committee.
you have any questions to staff or the committee? Appearing to be none. Just as, one comment, this is a project that has been long overdue, long coming. And just the radio system alone, for some of us that have been on the board for a while, remember when the paratransit bus disappeared and we couldn't find them? And this would eliminate that ever happening again, hopefully. Keep them in radio contact with everybody. So I believe that these are very important. Okay, so let's take item 5C to begin with. Recommend to the full HART Board to authorize the CEO to piggyback on Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office contract with Communications International to join the county radio system in the amount of $2,584,654 to 5-year annual maintenance agreement in the amount of $429,190 for a total not to exceed amount of $3,013,844. Do we have a motion?
Motion to,
Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Okay, I'm sorry. Motion is second. Any comments on the motion? Appear to be none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Appearing to be none, motion passes. Okay, item 5D, recommend to the HART Board of Directors to authorize the CEO to award a contract to Communications International for P25 radio communication system hardware in the amount of $3,692,871 and a 5-year warranty and support agreement in the amount of $506,011 for not to exceed amount of $4,198,882 and advance it to the full HART Board of Directors at the May 5th Board of Directors meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please. Any comments on the motion? Appearing to be none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, next presentation will be in support of 3 committee items, action items 5F, 5G, and 5H. Mr. Drainville, you're recognized to provide the overview of these items.
Thank you, Chair. So in this next presentation, Nicholas Goldburn, our Director of Fleet Maintenance, will share the current state of the fleet, highlight the benefits and savings associated with timely fleet replacement, and the importance of the state of good repair, and talk about the fleet's procurement process. The next 3 action items will request the committee's review of the request to purchase, replace, and expand our bus, paratransit, and non-revenue fleet. Funding for the bus purchase is allocated in the FY24 Section 5307P for $850,080, and capital reserves transferred from ad valorem for $7,149,920. The para fleet is being funded by the FY 2022 5307 Program of Projects Grant. The FTA grant number is FL-2023-024. The total amount budgeted for the paratransit fleet is $1,550,000, and therefore will be fund the purchase of $1,506,657. The non-revenue vehicles are being funded by the FY 2024 5307 Program of Projects Grant. The FTA grant number is FL-2024-070. The amount budgeted for the non-revenue vehicles is $344,921, and therefore will fund the purchase of $342,700. Mr. Goldburn, you are recognized.
Good morning, Mr. Drainville. Good morning, Board. Hope you guys everyone's having a wonderful day. My name is Nicholas Goldburn. I'm the Director of Fleet Maintenance. Today, I will go through a quick presentation. I will provide a comprehensive update on the state of the fleet and seek your support for the authorization of several critical vehicle purchases. The agenda for today's presentation The first item will be replacement needs for fixed route buses. Next, we will discuss our paratransit vehicle requirements to meet growing ridership, our non-revenue staff vehicle condition and a proposed replacement, an overview of our vehicle procurement process, and finally, the return on investment and a resolution requiring your approval. Let's start with our frontline capital assets. These vehicles are the backbone of our operations, and ensuring they remain safe, reliable, and efficient is critical to delivering quality service. Many of our buses and support vehicles have surpassed their useful life, and we must act now to prevent service interruptions. We currently operate 132 active buses. However, 61 of them have exceeded 500,000 miles, and 76 have passed 450,000 miles on average. These aging buses are increasingly unreliable and costly to maintain. The federal standard for a 40-foot heavy-duty transit bus is 12 years, 500,000 miles. So practically half our fleet is beyond its useful life, in a sense. Each new bus costs approximately $800,000. Our immediate capital need is $52 million. And over the next 7 years, we anticipate needing $150 million to replace our aging assets. To begin addressing this need, we request authorization to purchase up to 10 new 40-foot compressed natural gas buses from Gillig LLC for an amount not to exceed $8 million. Funding includes $850,000 from FY24 5307 grant and $7.15 million from our capital reserves. This is a financially sound investment and aligns well with our replacement strategies. Before I go any further, is there any questions on the fixed route replacement request for 10 buses? My next item will be, I'll briefly discuss our paratransit needs.
No, I'll hold my questions until the presentation is completed.
Thank you. Earlier, you heard from my chief, Mr. Shamakati, regarding our struggles with the taxi voucher program. We're also seeing the same challenges internally with our cutaway fleet. The graph you're looking at shows our actual miles driven internally and the ridership. And I want to call your attention to FY24, which is the last column on the right. You can see where our actual miles driven have declined versus the continued ridership increase that we see in that system. Paratransit ridership has increased significantly, driven by community growth, greater service demand. However, many of the current cutaways in use have exceeded their useful life. We need to modernize and expand this fleet to avoid service disruptions and reduce maintenance costs. Despite robust growth in the community, increased vehicle downtime has hindered our ability to deliver service. This is shown in that decline in actual miles in 2024. We're proposing to replace our aging paratransit vans with up to 36 SUVs, 16 for replacement and 20 for expansion. This is a cost-effective option that improves the reliability and is suited to meet our current service needs. Replacement will enhance service flexibility, minimize downtime, and allow us to meet increasing ridership demands more efficiently. The 20 expansion vehicles will position us to better respond to the growing demand. The SUVs cost 1/3 the price of your typical cutaway van. And 80% of our riders are not ambulatory, as mentioned earlier. With your approval, this will take our fleet from 83 vehicles for paratransit to 103, with a 50-50 split between ambulatory and non-ambulatory vehicles, thus adding flexibility to better address our service demands. This resolution seeks authorization to purchase up to 36 vehicles from Allen J. Automotive for a not-to-exceed amount of $1.5 million. This purchase will be fully funded by the federal grant FL 5307, 2022. Match using federal transportation development credits, meaning no local match is required, and will meet HART's procurement and federal policies. Next, I'll talk about our non-revenue fleet. Okay. Our non-revenue support fleet consists of 65 vehicles with an average age of 9 years and over 77,000 miles on average. The FTA defined the useful life of a light-duty vehicle to be 4 years or 100,000 miles. So many of our fleet are at beyond their useful optimal service life. This presents a safety risk and higher maintenance cost. We are requesting authorization to purchase 7 2025 Ford Interceptor SUVs from Allen J. Automotive, Inc., in a not-to-exceed amount of $342,700. This purchase will replace older high-mileage vehicles and is fully funded by Grant FL 5307-24. These replacements are critical for road supervisors and staff support vehicles to perform field work in a safe and efficient asset. Next, I'll discuss the process by which we procure vehicles. All vehicle procurements are conducted using Florida state contracts, ensuring competitive pricing and adherence to HART and federal procurement policies. By leveraging competitive cooperative contracts and grant funding, we reduce administrative burden and maximize cost effectiveness while maintaining compliance. The process typically starts with our capital budget request. With our capital budget request, it goes to board approval. The project manager then evaluates a procurement vehicle with our procurement team, and we continue the process until we receive board approval and we execute a purchase. Okay. What I bring before you today is an opportunity to reduce operational costs. We have learned, looking at our data, that each vehicle, the maintenance cost increases exponentially in the first 5 years. Additionally, there are opportunities here for fewer breakdowns, more nimble vehicles, less accidents, lower operating maintenance costs, which I spoke about, enhanced customer satisfaction, a long-term saving through reduced total cost of ownership. Investing in newer vehicles now presents greater costs down the line and supports a more reliable and efficient service for HART and its customers. To summarize, our frontline buses, paratransit vans, and staff vehicles are aging and require immediate attention. We are requesting the board support the purchase of 10 fixed-route buses, 36 SUVs, and 7 staff SUVs. Funding is secured through federal grants and state contracts, minimizing financial risk. These investments will safeguard operations, elevate customer experience, and position HART for future success. Thank you. I welcome your questions.
Okay, let's this is an awful lot here to unpack, so let's, Ms. Williams, you had a general question, I believe.
Yes, thank you. It makes sense to me when you present the material and we need an increase in the budget in order to move forward. But I'm starting to wonder, you know, as we look at these unilaterally, what is the plan across the board? Or how much are we have a deficit versus you're coming upon this? I mean, we've done some type of analysis and all things we're asking for at this point, and I just asked the question because because 65 vehicles that are, you know, past their limit, I don't think that just came up yesterday. So I'm just trying to understand the process of, if we don't get it in the initial budget, is it the stance that we go back and say, okay, we're gonna ask for more? And I see this around the board, and it just, like I said, just happens to be you with this question at this point. But I just want to understand the philosophy and how that happens.
If I may, I believe these items here are all included in the budget we approved, okay? It's just time for them to come forward in the normal process of things. I believe that the additional information is being offered, correct me if I'm wrong, is the overall status of where we are with our rolling stock and with our equipment. And this is something that has been brought out several times. I know I've seen it several times in the various budget iterations, but the 10 buses, the 10 fixed route buses, that's in the budget. That was already approved by us once before, and it's already been brought forward. Same with the paratransit, and same with the staff support vehicles. So this isn't new. This is all stuff that we're well aware of, but the additional information with the 65 buses encroaching on the end of their useful lives, this is information that is just not new, but it's just being reiterated and shared in a different capacity. I know when I made my budget presentation at the last board meeting, I alluded to some of these same situations. So I don't want the committee to think that this is all new revelations and now everybody's hair's on fire. This is stuff that we've talked about ad nauseum, and now's the next step to getting to addressing these in the budget cycle. So it's time to procure these. So unless you have more, you know.
No, you're absolutely correct, sir.
Excuse me, I would like to acknowledge that, just a little bit on what you said. So we are because of our funding challenges, we do go after grants very aggressively, and we know to keep our state of good repair up, we have to replace between 13 and 16 buses every year. But being each year when we create the budget, Ms. Kirk and I really sit down and look at what the revenues are, what I can put on capital reserve. We haven't in the past put much money in capital reserve, but specific for these reasons, that we have to do something. We can't go, since I've been here in 2018, we've done bus replacements every other year. So now we're moving on almost 3 years now we haven't done anything. So I got the staff together and really looked at what we have and what we could afford. So this is where we got, as far as the paratransit and the non-revenue, those are funded by grants, but we had to make a decision. We are a bus company, we need our assets, so we very, very strategic on budgeting for this capital reserve, and this is where we are today.
And how long does it take to get a bus?
So normally it was 12 months. Because of everything that's going on in the new administration, it could be up to 20 months.
That's what we got.
But we need a commitment letter from which I need board approval to get a commitment letter for Gillig to get us on the production schedule. So every day that goes by is time that could extend out the receipt of these buses.
So, just to be clear.
Wait a second, Ms. Williams, are you?
That clarifies my
Okay,
question.
good.
Thank you
Okay.
so much for
Mr. King.
sharing.
All right, so just to state it obviously, there's no net change to the budget. Okay, that's just what we want to make sure of, I think.
Mr. Knight. Well, we're just doing questions and comments. Mr. Hartfield, did you have a comment?
My comment is for the vehicles that we're replacing, what happens to those?
So normally we would auction them off. In the past, we've auctioned them off. If the funds come over 5,000, we would have to reinvest or pay back the FTA any monies from that asset. But the majority or the average is under $5,000 per vehicle.
Okay, and that money goes into unrestricted, or where does that money go?
That would go into the general fund. Money collected from an auction. Say we got $4,000 back from the auction of the vehicle, it would go back into the general fund.
Okay, is that money, those monies are unrestricted once they go into the general fund?
Yes, they are, but they're very minimal. Like he said, anything over 5,000, we have to give back to the FTA.
Okay,
So we can keep up to $5,000.
okay, okay.
And the sales are usually less than $5,000.
Well, I mean.
Yeah, so it's really scrap.
4,000 times 65 vehicles,
No,
that's
8,
considerable.
We're talking 10. We're talking 10 vehicles at this point. So you might be talking 50. We're only talking 10 vehicles that we're trying to buy here on the buses. This is individual motions now, keep in mind.
Yeah,
When you're
but
talking about liquidation.
collectively, there's a aggregation of 60-some vehicles, right? Did I miss something?
Yeah, we're doing this, we're talking 10 buses right now. A bus's scrap value is less than 5,000, otherwise we're gonna pay it back to the government, to the
Okay.
feds. Okay, and we're looking at another 36 potential SUVs for the
Paratransit service.
paratransit, okay? But again, with the same criteria manifests itself. So we're looking at 10, 17, maybe 45 vehicles here total, if we were to buy them all and get them all at the same time. So there's really not, the scrap value is de minimis in the overall scheme of things. So we're looking 20 months potentially before we would be able to scrap for the first bus. And that's if everything happened right away. So it's, I do have a question though. How many of our units, particularly with the paratransit, are sitting on the lot unusable due to the maintenance issues?
We average anywhere between 25 and 30 vehicles out of service per day, out of a fleet of 83.
Okay, and out of so 25 out of 83 are not available. And if they
On a daily
were-
basis.
Okay, so if we were, so once we get the additional 36, theoretically, we'll be at a fuller.
Yes.
Capacity.
An injection of new vehicles in the fleet will allow us to raise our percentage from around 70% being available for service each day to over 80%.
So our capacity increase, and we'd have less of a reliance on yellow cab then at that point.
Yes.
Assuming we were able to modify the expectations of the customers.
And the expansion should help address some of our yellow cab overflow. The majority of the overflow right now is just not having assets to send vehicles out. So we're sending folks to yellow cab versus providing that trip in-house for a lot of it.
Irrespective of ambulatory abilities and so forth. Okay, and then finally, the last is just want to reiterate, everything's fully funded, fully budgeted, and in the case of the paratransit and the support vehicles, it's state funding, FDOT? FDOT 5307 is FDOT? 5307. Yes? Oh, it's a
Federal and
okay,
state.
but it's not HART operating funds. It's fully grant money. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Dunn.
Yeah, there's one more question. Thanks for the presentation. Has there been any other option other than the auction for 5,000?
There are several options. We always try to seek the most advantageous method to HART when we dispose of vehicles. We've donated, we've auctioned, and in some very rare cases, we'll actually keep the vehicles on property and use several for spare parts if we have to. So, but as far as outside of those mechanisms, no, we have not explored others.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for, my recommendation at this point is we'll go forward, and that's what I'll vote on. But I do have a question around leasing vehicles. You know, if we know we're going to purchase a certain number of vehicles on a regular basis and the time out of use and so forth with the number of miles that are expected or at least exceeding those miles, do we consider leasing vehicles? Because after a certain point, they can just have their vehicles back.
Yes, we're actually exploring that option right now for the white fleet to see what it would cost to lease vehicles and reduce our capital costs, because the status quo is no longer sustainable. The longer we keep these vehicles, the more costly they are to maintain. So we are exploring those options.
Thank you.
Ms. Hatfield.
I'm curious why the leasing option wasn't presented to the board as a viable option.
Leasing option is something we just started exploring. We actually met last week with a vendor to learn more about how the government leasing program works.
Okay.
So it's not that we haven't taken it to the board this time. We have not even shown it to the CEO yet in depth. So it's in the process. It will eventually make it to the board if the CEO so decides.
Okay.
Mr. Knight.
Yes, thank you. Just like the last vote we did, can have some type of amendment with some information pertaining to leasing as well. Can you discuss?
The problem with that,
So, yeah, so, what, that would be, so, like, as I said, every day that goes by is puts us farther and farther out on the production line. As far as the non-revenue, I would love to pilot a leasing when it comes to the non-revenue, but when it comes to paratransit, specifically transit buses, there's not a lot of leasing companies that are gonna lease a transit bus. So we have a specific Gillig transit bus. I don't know, right now Gillig's leasing anybody. They're so backlogged with the purchases. And then there's the other thing about the grant requirements and how that works with the lease. So we'd have to really look in depth on how the federal funding is accountable to a leasing. But, I definitely would like to look into piloting the non-revenue because it makes sense there. It's a light-duty vehicle and they're readily available, where a transit bus, it was built in California. I don't think that would be a great option.
And if I may add, the order bank closes for the 36 vehicles with Ford in June. So we're literally under the wire trying to make the board meeting so we can place an order. If we don't, we will have to wait until the next order bank closes, and that's at the discretion of the OEMs. And they've already confirmed that in June, we will start seeing tariff markups. So we're currently placing these orders at contracted price using the state contract. That price will change in the coming months.
What's the predicted tariff markup
At a minimum, I'm hearing 10%.
on a 800,000 vehicle?
On the
$800,000
SUVs.
vehicle.
On the
On the
SUVs.
SUVs.
Yes.
Okay.
Gillig has been unable to confirm what the increase will be. So we're still waiting to hear what that number is going to be.
Okay.
okay, let's proceed then with item 5F. Recommend to the HART Board of Directors authorize CEO to purchase up to 10 40-foot compressed natural gas heavy-duty transit buses from Gillig LLC in a not to exceed amount of $8 million, and advance it to the full Board of Directors for the May 5th Board of Directors meeting for approval.
So
Do we
moved.
have a motion? Do we have a second?
moved.
Second, Gary Hartfield.
We have a motion and a second. Any comment on the motion? Appearing to be none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. All motion passes unanimous. Okay, do we have a motion to recommend to the HART Board of Directors to approve item 5G? That recommends the Board of Directors to authorize the CEO to purchase up to 36 support utility vehicles in a not-to-exceed amount of $1,506,657 from Allen J. Automotive Management, Inc. through the Florida Department of Management Services Motor Vehicle State Contract to expand services and replace aging and unreliable vehicles in support of paratransit operations. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Gary Hartfield.
Do we have a second? Motion is second. Any comment on the motion? Appearing to be none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I have
I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned $1 million. I think this says $342,000. $5G.
I mean, that's 5G is $1,506,000. 5H is $342,000. That's for the support vehicles.
That's not how it's tabbed. I'm looking at the same thing she is.
Yeah, I don't see that either, Gil.
Okay, we have it, all right. Okay, the motion 5G is for the 36 vehicles for the paratransit. My script says $1,506,000 from Allen J. Automotive Services. And then the 7 support vehicles is a $342,000.
Mr. Drainville, can you help us with this?
Yeah, that is correct. I have exactly what Director Schisler is reading off.
What we have in front of us is actually the reverse.
Okay.
5F and 5G are transposed, I guess.
Yeah, there are two different motions, one for L&J Automotive, but they're tabbed differently somehow. One's tabbed as 5G and 5H, and one's tabbed, but they're flipped in some cases.
Okay, in the motions, are the Interceptor, are the 36 support vehicles tabbed as 1,506,000? Or is it the 342,000?
That's for the 36 support vehicles.
Is the 1,506,000?
Yes.
Okay, that's the motion that I'm requesting.
I'm sorry.
Irrespective of the 5G or 5H. So the motion I'm requesting is for the 36 support vehicles for $1,506,000. Is that how it's in your books?
That's F, I think. And actually, no, F is something else.
F is the
No, F
buses.
is 1.5 million. Yeah, okay.
Okay,
That's F, at least in my book.
okay.
A
So
second.
the motion is for 36, irrespective of the item number, the motion is for 36 support vehicles for $1,506,000 from Allen J. Automotive Management. Okay, all right, we're all agreed with that motion. Okay.
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Okay, the final motion then, again, irrespective of the notation, recommends the 7 Ford Interceptor support utility vehicles in the amount of $342,000 through same vendor, Allen J. Automotive, not to through the Florida Department of Management Services vehicle contract. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any comment, discussion? Appear to be none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimous. Okay, the last action item today is to recommend to the HART Board of Directors to approve the resolution supporting transfer of the Section 5307H competitive grant in the amount of $4,862,280 to the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority. Mr. Drainville, you're recognized to provide an overview of this item.
Thank you, Chair. So back on February 3rd, 2025, PSCA CEO Brad Miller appeared before the HART Board of Directors to share the background of the ferry service, the grant itself, and the benefits of the grant transfer. After a robust discussion by the board, Commissioner Wassler made a motion to delay the approval of the resolution supporting transfer of the grant to PSCA until there is a consent from the PSCA Board of Directors and a plan presented. In addition, Director Knight stressed that the item needed to be delayed until the information could be presented at the Finance and Audit Committee prior to the discussion to the full board. So Debbie Leos, the PSCA CFO, is here today with a follow-up presentation and to respond to the committee members' questions.
Ms. Lewis, you're recognized. Welcome.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come before you today to talk about transferring the ferry grant to us. I've been in public transportation for 3.5 decades, and I came from Buffalo, New York, where I had been asked the CFO many times to run ferry service. It doesn't work well when you have 3 warm days out of the year. But down here in Florida, this is a wonderful opportunity for us. And what I'd like to say is we've brought this to our board, myself, our CEO, Brad Miller, and Darden Rife, our Chief Planning and Communications Officer, very well received. Now let's just take a step back and how did we come to this point? It's essentially the cancellation of the service that would have gone to MacDill was eliminated, and therefore there was no need for an additional vessel. So as a result, the grant is now at a point where it is what they call lapsing. It's been sitting dormant for quite a while. And about a year ago, we had Hillsborough, Tampa, and the city of St. Pete approach PSTA to run the service going forward. And now we know the contract is ending early, and I think we can all agree there was value in your foresight to have the idea to have a vessel or two so that an operator would have this and not have to depend on getting a vessel to and from, let's say, up north. So I was just up in Atlanta with one of your employees, a couple of your employees actually, and I had the great opportunity to meet with FTA. One of the items I discussed was this ferry grant. And FTA really appreciates your willingness and cooperation and consideration to be able to transfer this grant. And I know based on our discussion, HART is going to actually make the region look really good, especially to the granting agency, if you choose to move forward with this. This gives an opportunity to save money for the funding partners and save money as far as matching the grant. And we want to be able to take some of these savings and offload it from the operator by providing a vessel. And with that, you will have, from an operational standpoint, increased competition in our solicitation as we move forward for new service. So you're going to have savings with a vessel that would go right towards the operator. They don't have to worry about it. Now, I know our service with the Clearwater Ferry is not equal to what you've had going from Tampa to St. Pete. However, if you take a look at the costs, we're paying $87 an hour compared to the Cross Bay Ferry at around $450 an hour, at least 5 times the amount. Now, why is that? Well, the state was able to give the city of Clearwater the money to buy 2 vessels, provided them to the operator, which was competitively solicited, and therefore the operator only has to pay for crew, insurance, maintenance, etc. It has made a huge difference. So I think we can see savings going forward. As a CFO, I like to see savings. I like to see cash flow improvement, and this is an opportunity to do so. And with savings, we can have improved services. The service that is provided is about 70% local residents and 30% of our visitors. As we build the ridership, all this ridership data goes to FTA. It'll allow for more money to come back to the region that we can set aside for capital improvements and also allow for economic development on either side of the bay. So I think we can agree to achieve success here. It could be measured not only by the unique transportation that we'll offer, but it's also the ridership growth, the economic impact, cost reduction, cash flow improvement. But to achieve this success, we need to have a couple items we need to go through. So our goals of the action item today is to achieve a 10/1 start date for this year for a new contract as requested by our funding partners. The other is to transfer the grant to PSTA so that we can increase competition. We can also eliminate the local match to all of our funding partners. So hopefully we will be able to increase our ridership, the data, and more money to the whole entire region. In other words, we'll be able to collaborate to success. And with that, I will take any questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, ma'am, for your presentation. John King with the HART Board. The current route runs from where to where?
It's going from St. Pete to Tampa, and it will stay the same. What we would ultimately like to do on the St. Pete side is move the pier. It's a little off kilter from where it used to be, and we'd like to get it back to where it should be. So we'll be applying or in cooperation with the city of St. Pete for grant money to do that.
Where does it depart from from Tampa? Where's the landing point for Tampa?
That I honestly couldn't answer.
Okay. And how many riders transit on the ferry?
Hold on, I think I've got that. I apologize for looking through my notes. And I do not have that answer, but it is something I can certainly get for you,
Well,
the committee and the board, before we meet again.
well, let me ask the question another way. Does it actually alleviate any of the traffic congestion on the Gandy or the Howard Franklin or the other bridge across the bay?
I would say so, and it's a unique way to get from one place to the other. I've actually stayed overnight in your great city of Tampa when I've gone to a Lightning game because I didn't want to deal with the
Awesome.
traffic. So I think, you know, a lot of people do that, and it is a fun way to get to and from.
Well, what really is the specific benefit to the taxpayers of either Hillsborough or Pinellas?
It offers a public transportation that you can actually charge more for, and that's one of the things that we, as Loretta and I as CFOs, look at, and that is our return on the costs that we have, and this is something where you can charge more money. So it's a greater relief to the taxpayers. If we were to transfer the grant, we will be using no cash from any of your partners. So we won't be using taxpayer money from your partners to bring this grant to an award.
Well, you'll have to forgive me, but I don't think this ferry proposal is any more beneficial than the one that we canceled 2 years ago, or at least the county canceled 2 years ago. And frankly, the only reason I could see for even improving it is to avoid embarrassing ourselves with FTA by returning it to them.
I think every mode of transportation will bring its own benefits, and I appreciate your opinion on that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Hartfield.
Thank you, Debbie, for the presentation.
Certainly.
Have you done the calculation as it regards the return on assets or the return on the investment?
Well, these vessels will have a long, useful life, and what we'll be able to do, as I mentioned, as you collect data and it goes into what's called the National Transit Database, we'll be getting money back to the region, so we'll be able to fully fund the boat when we go ahead and replace it X number of years from now. So there's an economic benefit even above and beyond that.
Okay.
Mr. Knight, you had a question?
Yeah, there's, thanks again for the presentation. There's no risk to HART, and we're not going to use it in recommendation in all the points. That's up to Pinellas to work out. So I'm in favor of moving it on to the general committee and let all decide on it.
Thank you. I do have a question. I don't know if anybody can answer this or not, but in the event that this were to lapse, and using your terminology, what happens to the grant money? My understanding is that it go to Poughkeepsie for a bus terminal or a bus station, doesn't go back into the coffers. It's already been encumbered. Is this true?
It will go back into what I'll call the ferry pot of money to go to another city or transit authority who's running ferries.
Okay, so this has already been allocated, already been encumbered.
Yep.
And it's already waiting for somebody to spend it. And
Yes.
so why not keep it in the region, keep it in our area? But it's not going back to any taxpayer anywhere. This
No,
money's
it is
already
not.
been allocated. So, okay. That's, I want to clarify that and make sure, because it's not going to go back to anybody else's pocket. Any other questions or comments? Okay, do we need a motion for this? Okay, so let's, so is there, can we have a motion to recommend to the HART Board of Directors to approve item 5I, which would be the transfer of the grant to the Pinellas Transit PSTA, right? Okay. Advance it to the full board of, for full Board of Directors for the May 5th meeting. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any comment on the motion itself? Appearing to be none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes four to one.
Thank you so
very
much.
Appreciate it. Mr. Drainville, for procurement monitoring, you're recognized to share updates to the procurement monitoring reports.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So starting off with the sole source procurement, there were no sole source solicitations since the last committee meeting. Moving on to task orders, 2 BTI construction task orders were issued since the March committee. The first to AJ General Construction to remove existing shelters and amenities and install 10 bus shelters and street furniture at various bus stops throughout the county. The second was also to AJ General Construction to construct a bus stop and landing pad on the north side of Sinclair Hill at Livingston Apartment Complex. There was 1 A&E Design Services task order issued since the last committee to Kimley Horn to design a bus bay, shelter pad, and landing pads on the north side of Rowlett Park Drive near the intersection of Waters Avenue. Moving on to general consultants, there was 1 task order to Michael Baker International to provide an initial emergency response and damage assessment report for these streetcar bond repairs. And then moving on to notice of solicitations that were issued, there were 2. A solicitation for a contractor to furnish and install a network storage system to back up production systems and data in our network environment. The purpose of this project is to add network storage to our production environment as a backup target for all production data and systems. The system will give the necessary storage and backup to the network environment away from production storage. This system will also reduce the threat of losing data as it will be completely separate from the production environment. And the second, a solicitation for a Cisco wireless controller to replace the current equipment that is at its end of useful life. And that concludes my procurement report.
Any questions or comments by committee members? Appearing to be none, this concludes the regular business of the meeting. Is there any old business? Any new business? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. And we do have a Operations and Safety Committee meeting that's going to start as soon as they get set up. Good morning. It's still morning? Yeah, still morning. Okay, good morning. Please silence all electronic devices for the duration of the meeting. Welcome to the April 21st, 2025 Operations and Safety Committee meeting. I'm Councilmember Gil Schisler, Chair of the Operations and Safety Committee. We can have a roll call.
Committee Member Henderson. Committee Member King.
Here.
Committee Member Knight.
Here.
Committee Chair Schisler.
Here.
Committee Chair Williams.
Here.
You do have a quorum.
Thank you. The meeting format is hybrid. The quorum is physically present at the County Center, 601 East Kennedy Boulevard, 26th floor conference room, and the rest of the board members may be participating via communication media technology. If you please look at your screen, an image of the flag is displayed. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Next item on the agenda is public comment. There's no one scheduled. Is there anyone present for the public comment this morning? Appearing to be none. We will keep moving. This would conclude the public input section. So the next item is the approval of the meeting minutes. Excuse me. In the packet is the minutes from the February 17th, 2025 Operations and Safety Committee meeting. If everybody's had a chance to look at it, there's a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please. Any comments on the, we have a motion and a second. Any comments on the motion? Appearing to be done. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimous. Thank you very much. Presentations. We have presentation 4A is the Operations and Maintenance Monthly Metrics Report for, excuse me, January, February, and March. Mr. Anthony Haywood, Director of Bus Operations, Mr. James Sacker, Director of Parish Transit, and Mr. Nicholas, I'll keep going, Mr. Nicholas Goldburn, Director of Fleet Maintenance, and Dale Smith, Director of Facilities, and Mr. Richard Campbell, Chief Safety Officer. Mr. Drainville, you're recognized to introduce the presentations.
Good morning again, committee members. Today's metrics report will cover the months of October through December of 2024. Starting with today's report, Mr. Anthony Haywood will present the bus operations metrics, and Mr. James Sacco will present the paratransit metrics. Mr. Haywood, you are recognized to start the presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Director, as well as CEO Drainville. Good morning. I will be presenting the matrix for our Director of Bus Operations for our fixed route side. You want it? First slide we talk about is our on-time performance trend. Overall, for all our modes of transportation. As we can see, for the fixed route side, we are having a steady increase from our previous October, November, and December. We grew 72%, dipped a little bit in February at 69, and then raised again at 71% in March in our overall spring push. Our ridership per mode, we're a steady increase over the January, February, and March. Another slide would show our 6 months trend where we had over 900,000 ridership in October, November, and December, and it appears that we had dipped in January, February, and March, but we look at that as the holiday season where people were here more in Tampa. So we had a higher ridership in our October, November, and December. Our 849,126 as our average over January and February and March is kind of our steady ridership that we kind of have as we can continue to grow. We expect more ridership as the summertime approaches. Over our weekly ridership, of course, our high-performing routes are 1, our 6, our 34, and our 400 continuously to show high levels, especially our Route 1. Of course, our Route 1 at this time is fare-free, so we're having a great influx of more ridership because people are able to ride it freely and be able to connect throughout our city through our other routes. But from our on-time performance aspect, again, as I indicated earlier, that our January, February, and March number, where we're not at our level of a 77% that we want to be at our on-time performance, we are steadily increasing over the previous 6 months to where our January, February, and March are averaging in the 70s, the low at this point 70s. Our individual routes per se, of course, you know, the more ridership we have on our buses, the kind of the areas that we kind of struggle in to get that to that 77%, especially from our Route 1, our 6, and our 34, going through our downtown area could be kind of challenging from time to time. So that's where our ridership is going to increase as, hopefully going to increase as the spring and summertime approaches. Again, from our top 5 route performances, our 6, our Route 1, again, based off of ridership and our on-time performance, again, high ridership, you know, we struggle from time to time with some of our on-time performance because of the amount of people that ride our buses, as well as the routes of where they go down in our downtown area. So it can have a little adverse effect over us overall. But we do like to say that we are pleased and we're completing we're completing our trips at 99% overall from our January and February and March. So even though we have some challenges to meet service on a day-to-day situation, we are completing our trips at a very high level. So we are providing the service that we need for our Hillsborough citizens on a daily basis. At this point, that is all I have for fixed route. Do you have any questions for me at this time?
Any question for the committee members? Appear to be none.
Thank you, Mr. Secor.
I'd like to say good morning to the chair, good morning to committee members, good morning to CEO. That's it? Okay, great. All right, so this report, it goes over the paratransit total volume. It shows trip counts as well as ridership. Ridership numbers include companions and PCAs, and we're in the first half of FY25. For Q1 of FY25, HART Plus and Yellow Cab have combined trip counts of 72,402 trips, or we completed 72,402 trips, and a ridership of 77,170 passengers. For Q2, HART Plus and Yellow Cab have performed a combined trip count of 75,461 trips and a ridership of 77,788 passengers. Year to date, we've completed a total of 147,863 trips and had a total of 154,958 riders combined. Slide number 2 shows our paratransit on-time performance. This is combined with Yellow Cab and HART Plus. For October 2024, we had a combined OTP of 91.6. We have a goal of 92.5, so that month we were impacted by hurricanes and whatnot, so we're under the goal. November 2024, we had a combined OTP of 93.6%. December 2024, we had a combined OTP of 92.6%, which gives us an overall OTP of 92.6 for Q1. January 2025, we had a combined OTP of 94.6%. February 2025, we had a combined OTP of 94.3%. In March 2025, we had a combined OTP of 94.3%. For Q2, we had a total combined OTP of 94.4%, which exceeds our total goal of 92.5%. Our OTP for the first half of FY25 is at 93.5%. And that is the last slide for paratransit. I'm available for any questions.
Anybody have any questions? I did. What's a PCA?
Personal care assistant.
Okay, just curious. New an acronym. Knew it had to be something simple. Couldn't think of it.
Good morning, Board. Mr. Drebel, we'll meet again. Nicholas Goldburn, Director of Fleet Maintenance. I'll be going over the fleet metrics performance results for the last quarter. Okay. First metric I'm going to talk about is their fixed route fleet availability. Our goal is to have 80% of the fleet available for peak service in the morning. Before I dive into our performance, I do want to say thank you to the folks that work in my department. Earlier, you heard me talk about our aging fleet. The men and women back at 21st who work on these vehicles and keep them up and running every day are doing an exemplary job, and they're extremely extraordinary with what they're working with. Our goal is to be at 80%. We seem to average right around 79, 78%. And that's with the aging equipment, and roughly 25% of our skilled positions were short FTEs. For the month of January, February, and March, we averaged 78%. Next, I'll talk about scheduled safety inspections. This is another area where, over the past few months, we've had a few challenges, majority being staffing challenges. We're down 7 technicians. We're budgeted for 40. It's a nationwide shortage. The holiday season was extremely impactful on our ability to complete inspections. For the last quarter, our average PM on-time compliance was 79%. In January, that fell to 16%, despite completing 101 inspections that month. The driver, manpower, vehicle availability, and holidays. My next metric is mean distance between major mechanical failures. Our goal is to drive 15,000 miles between each major mechanical failure. We were on a wonderful trend for January and February. I was actually quite hopeful I'll be able to go back to my team, say, hey guys, we did it. We hit that 15,000 miles between major mechanical failure. Then March came around. March was a bad month for us. We lost over 7 engines in that 1 month. It takes approximately 2 weeks to turn an engine job around. So we did see a decline because the folks that back at the office, they had to turn the wrenches a little bit faster to make sure we can get people to where they wanted to go. So despite not meeting our goal, my team, I believe, they're doing an extraordinary job with what they're working with. And I want to take today's meeting to give them a shout. That's all, folks.
Any questions? Mr. King, you're recognized.
The major mechanical failures you experienced in November and March, are they attributable to any one particular cause?
Microphone.
I'm sorry. The mechanical failures you had in November and March, are they attributable to any one particular cause?
No, they're not attributable. What we do look at is the aggregate in each subsystem failure. So we look at our engine systems, our cooling systems, transmissions. And the majority of our failures or engine-related. And that goes back to having 50 buses that need to be repowered, which team's working aggressively on right now to replace all our engine and transmission and buses that we were not able to replace.
And these would be in some of your older buses then?
These are all buses that have already exceeded their useful life.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ms. Williams, I think you have to-
Next,
I
I'll
just
introduce-
wanted to echo your sentiments. We don't understand the amount of work that takes place behind the scene, and to call out your team is really grateful, so I want to echo your sentiments.
Thank you. I'll pass it on.
I had a question. You talked about the shortage of technicians for safety and inspections and so forth. Is there any way we could grow our own using local technical institutes where we can bring in mentorships, or, I don't know, have we looked into anything like that?
Yes, we have. Actually, we've worked real close with HCC over the past few years. Majority of the new talent we have right now came directly from HCC. It's an industry-wide shortage. We're competing against dealers that actually have, extremely lucrative salaries, and we're a transit agency, but we're making progress. We've developed an apprenticeship program in-house. We're working with local schools, and we're trying our best to recruit and build our own talent.
Good. Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right.
Good report. Anybody else have anything else?
Yes, sir.
Yes, again, thank you for the presentation. What about, like, some of the employees on the bus or around, like, putting in for, like, apprenticeship or to become journeymen or whatever? I know at Tico that we had a good program going on and did a lot of hiring within from that.
We do, actually. A lot of our folks came up from apprenticeship. I've been at HART for 20 years. I started as an apprentice mechanic. Granted, I came from the Army, and things were a little bit different back then, but I'm always encouraging folks to find a career. We keep 4 FTE positions available for the apprenticeship program. The program's 18 months long. There's a series of tests and requirements that the technicians have to pass, and once they do pass that program, they'll graduate and become a B technician. At that point, they're able to work on their own. We are limited by 1490 as far as what technicians can and can't do. For inspections, you cannot do an inspection until you're promoted and have at least 1 year of experience.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, committee members, Mr. Drainville, Dale Smith, Director of Facilities, and I'll be presenting the quarterly update for the Facilities Department. First, we'll show our completed work orders for the route maintenance team. The preventive maintenance work orders include pressure washing each site, pest control treatments, and shelter inspections. The demand response work orders include our C-Click fix reports, any customer service complaints received, and work orders generated by our inspections. Building and grounds, this slide shows the completed work orders. Our preventive maintenance work orders are work orders that are generated monthly, quarterly, and annual to do PM inspections on equipment. The demand response work orders include our daily work orders generated from employee requests and completed inspections. Our work order completion requirement is 100% for the work orders generated each month, and our demand work orders must be completed within 48 hours. One of the first projects we completed in January, we had a return to the office initiative. We completed an upgrade to the cubicle furniture on the 3rd floor. The upgrade welcomed our employees back to the office with a larger and more spacious work area. Also included in this initiative was a detailed carpet cleaning, painting of the office space, and the installation of new kitchen equipment in the employee break room. In January, some employees raised some concerns over the availability of parking spaces in the employee parking lot at 21st Avenue. The Facilities Department contracted a vendor to restripe the employee parking lot area and to add an additional 50 parking spaces with curb stops in our overflow parking area. This project has eased the employees' concerns over the number of available parking spaces for employees. In response to several safety concerns brought to our attention by supervisors and employees during the DACO gate construction, we quickly implemented several new safety initiatives for employees working in the bus yard. These safety measures included a wider walkway for employees, providing a safe area to walk to their vehicles during pullout, a creation of a safety vest zone that required all employees to wear their safety vests when walking through the bus yard. Other safety initiatives implemented this quarter included the reduction of the speed limit in the bus yard from 10 miles an hour to 5 miles an hour. Bus lot line striping was completed to improve parking lane identification, and the stop bars were repainted at all intersections. We also added 7 new solar light poles in the dark areas to improve lighting and increase visibility at night. The removal of dumpsters and other items that were stored near the construction area were also removed to give operators sufficient room to navigate their bus during morning pullout. A new 10-ton HVAC unit was installed for the streetcar administrative offices. This new unit will now cool all the office areas located on the second floor. The project included the replacement of the supply and return ductwork for each office and added additional ductwork for the phone room and data center. And as HART implemented the Route 1 Fare Free initiative in January, the Route Maintenance Department installed signage and sidewalk decals at every stop that serves Route 1. These new marketing tools have been instrumental in alerting all patrons that the Route 1 is fare free until January 4th of 2026. If there are no questions, I'll turn it over to Mr. Richard Campbell.
Any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Chair, Directors, CEO Drainville. My name is Richard Campbell. I'm the Chief Safety Officer, and I will be reporting the safety metrics for the months of January, February, and March. So for fixed route safety report for January, February, March, for the month of January, we had 1 injury reported, 6 safety events, and 3 assaults. For February, we had 3 injuries, 8 safety events, and 4 assaults reported. And for the month of March, 2 injuries, 3 safety events, and 1 assault reported for fixed route. Fixed route injuries for the month of January, February, March, as you can see, are self-imposed 1.0 per 100,000 revenue miles is our goal, according to our PTASP. For the month of January, we're at 0.18. For the month of February, 0.40. And for the month of March, 0.55. Our route safety event for January, February, March as well. For the month of January, we had a slight uptick at 1.07, February for a 0.20, and March for a 0.18. Paratransit route safety report for the same months. January, we had 1 safety event reported. For the month of February, 1 safety event reported. And for the month of March, 2 safety events reported. Streetcar safety report, same months, same quarter. 1 safety event for January, nothing to report for February, and March, 2 safety events. Preventable and non-preventable accidents for the quarter. For January, we had 5 preventable incidental accidents, 9 preventable accidents, and 23 non-preventable accidents. February, we had 6 preventable incidental accidents, 7 preventable accidents, 13 non-preventable accidents, with 6 pending investigation. And for the month of March, 5 preventable incidentals, 7 preventable, and 13 non-preventable. Any questions?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
The assaults, can you share more about that? It seems alarming to me when I see.
So we count all assaults. So in these particular cases, they were non-contact. So we had a couple people spit on the shield, a couple people bang on the shield, make a threatening remark to the operator, but never touch the operator. So we do consider that an assault.
What happens in those situations? Does the driver notify someone back here and then there's action taken at that point, or what's the protocol?
Absolutely. Anytime an operator encounters a customer that is acting in this, this way, then they are to report it to control, and control will send, you know, a supervisor, our AGS, our contracted armed security company, and law enforcement, you know, depending on what, you know, they explain the scenario is. More often than not, customers usually just get off the bus and leave. But if it is egregious enough, and sometimes the customers, believe it or not, just hang around and we're able to apprehend them. If we do, then we notify a TPD or HCSO, and if it's, you know, egregious enough, we'll have them, you know, trespassed or removed.
Any questions? Thank you, Richard. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Next presentation will be an update on the comprehensive operational analysis. Mr. Drainville, you're recognized to introduce the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So many of you remember that one of the suggestions or requests that came out of the FDOT operations analysis was how to conduct a COA, or a comprehensive operations analysis. So HART has engaged WSP to conduct that COA, and they are here today to provide a status report, summary of key findings and service change scenarios. Ms. Cassandra Borges, you are recognized to present.
Welcome.
Good morning. Hope you're all doing well. It's getting close to lunchtime, so I'll try to make this informative and as short as possible. My name is Cassandra Borchers. I am from WSP. I'm actually a longtime resident of Hillsborough County and the city of Tampa, and I moved here to do transit projects. In fact, my first project out of graduate school was working for HART. So I have a very good love of this organization. After that, I spent the next 10 years traveling the country, doing work for major capital investment projects, as well as major operation projects, including those in South Florida and the Tampa Bay region. Prior to joining WSP just a couple years ago, I spent 10 years with the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority as their Chief Development Officer. So I'm well aware of the issues that this agency is going through, and how important a comprehensive operational analysis is to finding the efficiencies within your service development. So part of this presentation is something that the HART board has seen before, but I thought it was really important to start today with the information about how your system is performing. And ultimately, this project is to look at how to improve service reliability. And we're looking at that in two different ways. One is customer satisfaction. How do your current riders look at your system, and are they using it the way that they'd like to use it most? Are they using it in a way that serves their needs? The second way we would like to look at the system is to assess emerging markets. The Tampa Bay region and Hillsborough County especially is growing at a phenomenal rate. Accommodating those people in Hillsborough County is a big job, and the Planning Commission does population projections and employment projections in order to maintain a good look at what investments need to be made in the county. As part of that, we're looking at where can you build new constituencies of riders in those growth areas. This is a timeline of our project, and it's really just to show you those areas in orange are public engagement. The areas in blue are times that we're going to come to the board to discuss either information or decisions to be made. And you can see we've been doing a lot of the background technical work, and that's what I'm presenting to you today. But it's starting to come to the point where we're going to the public. And so some of the information that we're showing you today and then to the board at your May board meeting is to say, this is what we're taking to the public. I'd like to make sure that you know what is going to be shown to them before they see it. So as part of this project, we looked at your efficiency and your ridership versus your revenue hours. While your bus ridership remains below 2020 levels, your ridership has actually increased for the amount of service that you're putting out on the road. So your efficiency is very high. In fact, if you were putting out the service that you had prior to 2020, you'd have almost 14 million boardings annually. And that means there is a tremendous latent demand that's out there in the public for services. Another way to look at operating efficiency is look at your passenger trip costs. Those have also dropped. Again, you're getting more riders for the level of service that you're putting out there, and your productivity is very high. You're meeting a lot of your metrics for individual routes. In fact, there aren't a lot of routes that are really performing under what they should be. In fact, when we looked at your peers, you're actually performing much above your peers for many of the routes. And so looking at ways to cut service to gain efficiencies is a very difficult process. And so we had to look at extreme examples in order to show what are the changes that could be made in the system and also what is the effect of that change. So right now, this is your current level of service. Your weekday productivity is focused on the city and out in Citrus Park and Town and Country. You have lower levels of usage down in South County and in South Tampa, which is understandable. In addition to that, many of your routes, especially those on major corridors, are still operating at 60-minute service. This makes it very difficult for people to change routes, to connect to other routes, and get to where they're going because the routes come so infrequently. As I mentioned before, we're also looking at population and employment density. This is a look at what the population and employment densities are right now, and you can see where your system is performing well is also where you have the densest populations. As we start to look at what are the projections out to 2050, you'll see those activity centers pop, downtown, USF, and West Shore. Those are the 3 major activity centers in the entire region, and you're really drawing people into those activity centers from Pinellas County, from Pasco County, and Polk County, because those are so important to the viability of the economy here. So again, real quick, the ridership is up, the efficiency is up, while your labor costs and ridership and running times are increasing. You have, and you could have additional resources to maintain frequencies. You're still performing very efficiently for what you have. I mean, these folks that we've been working with, your staff, they've been doing so much with so little for so long, they forgot that they're supposed to do not as well, but they are doing an amazing job, as you heard from their last report, taking what they have and doing just a great job in getting those service out when they can. There are opportunities to eliminate less productive routes, but honestly, when we start to take a look at that, it is not without a deep cost to your existing ridership. So again, we're looking at 2 ways to reallocate services, because in this study, this is revenue neutral. So we're really not talking about new revenues and putting it into the system, although the study does inform you, if you had new revenues, where would those revenues be most productive? So looking at it 2 different ways. Customer satisfaction, we're looking at on-time performance and investment in your core, meaning where transit works best. If you put your resources there, what does that look like? If you put it in areas where there is growth, potential for new riders, what does that look like? Just wanted to let you know we have done extensive internal discussions talking to your operators. This is your front line. These people really know what's going on in your system, and they've given us some great feedback on some of the changes that could be made in streamlining routes that could be eliminated and reallocated, but also some areas where they really need to see additional service. And the number one thing they talked about was you just need more vehicles out there in order to maintain the frequencies that you've promised to the public. So in these scenarios, these cuts are extreme, these cuts are deep. And the reason for that is we want to run this through a travel demand model to see what is the effect of these changes. So I want to let people know that if anybody's watching from the public, this is not the final recommendation from this study. These are bookends of what could be done And we will bring these back to you in a hybrid scenario for decision-making. So this is for informational purposes only. In both the scenarios, we looked at these eliminated routes and put them in different parts of the system to see what would happen. So this is what it would look like for your system, and this is based on frequency. So the darker colors are higher frequencies, your 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and your lighter colors are 30 minutes and 60 minutes. So you can see in the first scenario where we're focusing on customer satisfaction, we're putting that service in the core. In the future growth areas, making it more evenly allocated across the system, so you have a better idea of what would happen if you're creating an even system that is more equitable across the county. For the first scenario, we took those hours from the eliminated routes and put them back into the core. And when we ran it through the travel demand model, we got about a 10% increase in ridership. That means those routes that were eliminated, not only was the ridership recovered, you went beyond that. The challenge here was the number of hours to put into the peak times. We didn't have enough vehicles. So while we're leaving some hours on the table here, what would allow you to use those hours and be truly revenue neutral is a capital investment in additional available vehicles. I know this is a very much a big challenge, but it is a reality of how can you be more efficient. The second scenario, to look at future growth areas, again, we have the issue of not being able to allocate during your peak times because of a vehicle shortage. But in this case, the amount of riders that you would gain by putting even service across the county in those growth areas does not exceed the amount of riders that you lose by eliminating the routes in other parts of the county. So one of the questions that we looked at was, well, what if you change some of the opportunities in the county, such as eliminating service to, just take an example, South County, and replacing it with microtransit zones. One of the challenges with microtransit is the type of vehicles and the types of trips. And you talked about that at your previous committee meeting about more of a concierge service, and microtransit allows more of that kind of service, although there is more of an expectation of a group ride. You still cannot have that many trips within an hour in order to go above what you're currently putting out in the service. So just to make that more concrete, the Route 31, which goes down to South County, gets about eight riders an hour. This service would only get you 3 to 4 riders an hour just based on how the service is put out on the street. And it would actually not save you any money in the process. Any changes to that route would actually be put into the costs of a microtransit service. And so your cost would be about the same, but the ridership would be much lower just based on how the trips perform. The other thing is you may also experience a latent demand out there because you're providing a better service, but less people would be able to use it, much like the paratransit service that Chief Operating Officer Sean McCarthy talked about earlier this morning. So there's, when we talk about the technical side of doing this, there's always multiple questions that we want to ask on the technical side so that we can answer them to board members. And one of the questions that we got from staff was, well, what if we didn't make the cuts? What would that look like? And if we said, well, the value of those cuts, and we put that just on top of our service. And so we took a look at that, and you would gain ridership to about 23%. So if you put about 300 hours of service back into the core, so layering on top of what you already have, your ridership would grow almost by a quarter of what it is today. You would need about 30 more vehicles in order to perform that service, but what it's telling you is that there is a demand out there that is being unserved, and if you had additional resources, this is where you should put it. So we'll take questions. Happy to talk about the technical. I also have with me Eric Hines, who has been doing the travel demand modeling and much of the project itself. Our next steps will be taking this to the public for a survey, reaching out more to the internal staff and the operators, and then bringing it back to you all to take a look at a hybrid scenario and something that may actually be something that you would like to implement.
Mr. King, you recognize.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. In order to realize the ridership potential, that latent ridership potential that you're referring to, we would need to increase the number of buses we have available to put in service. But would you agree that in order to do that, we have to basically put the heavy maintenance facility in place first in order to support those buses?
Well, yes, those are two different projects. And so I do know about the maintenance facility. I think from the perspective of your bus replacement program, that is already in place. So you'll be looking at replacing buses anyway that will be affected by what the maintenance facility has available to it. I also understand that you are looking at putting out the phase one, which relocates the fueling lane, which would actually make the evening maintenance a little bit easier based on where the CNG maintenance bays are located. So even the early steps in moving towards the maintenance facility rebuild is going to make that a little bit more accessible. That was a long answer for a short question, but I wasn't expecting maintenance facility questions.
Well, I'm sorry. I just, it's like a building block approach to getting to where do we want to be, later on, down the road. And in order to do that, if we're going to try and optimize what our ridership potential is, the service what we're providing to the public, we have to be able to service and maintain the newer buses that are coming online, which we have a harder time doing with the facility we have now because of its inefficiencies and the fact that it's really not constructed in a manner that allows us to serve those vehicles in the way that they would need to be serviced, if I understand that correctly.
If I could speak on that. So I could say, 6 years ago when I came to HART, we had about 185 buses. So at the current footprint of the operations, we could incorporate 30 vehicles, but probably not much more than that, and operate. It really puts us pretty much back to pre-COVID service. Okay. So that's where we'd be. So we could handle that now, but anything more than that, then we'd be at full capacity.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your update. Did you have more?
No.
Next presentation is the last presentation is the operational update for Route 1. Mr. Drainville, would you like to provide an overview?
Yes, this presentation will provide an operational updates on the free and expanded Route 1 service. Ms. Heather Sobush, HART's new Director of Service Planning, will present.
Thank you. Good morning. All right, so this is an update on Route 1, which, as you all know, has been fare-free since January and will continue to be fare-free through January 4th, 2026. Okay, hold on. Okay. So Route 1 was selected because it is the highest ridership route. It has the most transfers to the streetcar, and it connects to 70% of the rest of the bus network. So the goals of the pilot are to demonstrate how being fare-free affects service quality and ridership. In the first few months, as you can see here, on-time performance has increased from 69% to 77% on weekdays, likely due to the faster boarding times without riders having to pay the fares. Ridership has also increased both year over year and month over month since December, with the highest percentage increase on Saturdays, or Sundays, I'm sorry. We also conducted a survey. We had 149 riders that responded, and this showed that 17% of the riders are new, and that 90% don't have access to a vehicle. It also showed that the far majority would still ride the Route 1 without or with fares, which is likely due to the fact that over 58% need to transfer, so they have to pay fares on the other routes. The next steps are to continue to monitor the route for ridership and on-time performance, to conduct quarterly surveys, and then to bring it back to you each quarter with additional updates on ridership and on-time performance. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions or comments?
Hi, just one question. The Sunday ridership, any thoughts as to why that's showing such a significant increase?
I'm not exactly sure. I've only been here, this is the beginning of my third week, so.
Okay, no worries.
I haven't conducted a lot of analysis.
It was more of a curiosity than anything else. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
I do have one, on the operator responses, not all were favorable. Were there any negative problems that they saw?
Well, I think what we heard is just that they had higher passenger loads, which I think we think was great, but maybe some of the operators didn't feel the same. They did say that they did see the on-time performance improving. So I think that's a positive from the operators.
Improving. Okay. I mean, it's not longer boarding times and disembarking, putting the bikes on the front of the.
No, I think shorter boarding times because people aren't, fumbling to find their fare payment.
Oh, they have to fumble with the flamingo cards. Okay, cool. Close my agenda. Hold on a second.
I have a question.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Anybody else, any comments? Oh, I'm sorry. Ms.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Thank you for the presentation. I want to see what's happening with Route 1. So is there anything to glean from this that we can take and address right away? Or the bus on-time arrival, or I think that's what they said, that it was not impacted. And I would think that maybe it would be, but is it taking that much time for people to find funds in order to pay for their service?
Yeah, on-time performance did go up. So it's more on time than it was previously. I think it's only been 3 months, so we're just going to continue to monitor and, see what we can do to improve. I did see, in the presentation Cassandra just gave, one idea was to do some bus stop consolidation on the route to also improve on-time performance.
Thank you.
What happens when you do that? I'm sorry. Bus stop consolidations.
Just reducing the number of bus stops.
I know that, but I'm saying it's now further for the customers to get to the bus stops. That doesn't seem intuitive to me. How does that?
Well, we'd have to analyze the current stop spacing and see if there's some that are just a couple hundred feet from each other.
Okay.
So typically, the industry standard would be a quarter mile.
Yes, I thought.
Yeah, so we wouldn't make it worse on.
No, okay, that's how I want to make
Yeah.
sure.
So I want to say the objective to the Route 1 free fare pilot is just to get more people to more people aware of transit, and it is an option. And when you invest in it, this is what it could be, is kind of what HART's objective is to this pilot.
Any other questions or comments?
One other question, I think. Well, what would happen if the current funding from the city of Tampa were to be exhausted or eventually expire, and then it no longer becomes a funded route?
So I can answer that. So we anticipate that this funding will end, and that's our mindset right now. Unless we know we have an extensive outreach to the public, letting everyone know that this is gonna end in January, unless the city comes forth with some, that states to us that they actually wanna fund it again. But as of right now, we're anticipating this free service to end.
Well, how would that affect the consolidation of bus stops?
Well, consolidating the bus stops would be advantageous to HART no matter what. Just making our system much more efficient.
Thank you both.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good presentation. Thank you. Welcome aboard. Included in the committee meeting packet is the update on the heavy maintenance facility. Does the committee have any questions on this report? Well, we have everybody here to report and answer the good questions. They're all sitting way down in the hinterlands. God bless. No other questions? Okay, good. This concludes regular business for the meeting. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.